This is the story of how a love that would have appeared to have long since faded away was present all along, waiting for the moment a girl would allow herself to accept it. A girl named Lily Everett met Theodore Valentino 2 years ago, before the events that would lead to irreversible. Poor Lily's father called her into his study one day and told her she would marry Duke Valentino. The girl was shocked at the time, she thought. Has her father finally lost his mind? Why, though? She wonders at all, for he has long since lost his humanity and dignity. The Valentino family is a family that has been protecting the North since the founding of the Francis Kingdom. For generations, the heads of the family have made pacts with powerful spirits, but in recent decades, cracks have spread across this foundation, and a mysterious discord has claimed the lives of the previous Duke and Duchess, as well as the family's heir, Camille Valentino. Now only his younger brother, Theodore Valentino, continues the family business that may have come to an end. Because of such fissures, Valentine's family desperately needed support. From the other families, however, they were completely isolated by the forces that were trying to contain the power. And at the center of it all was Lily Everett's family, too. The girl has thought many times that perhaps it was her family that was involved in causing the crack, and now her father wants her to marry a victim of these incidents. The girl's father said that Duke Valentine had always been an uneasy opponent. However, lately he was desperate for support from other families. He also said that through this marriage, Valentino will be financially supported by their family, and they will finally have the opportunity to wipe them off the face of the earth. Father said that he would certainly resist at first, but eventually, sooner or later, he would give in. And from that day forward, Lily will be taking lessons for brides, because she should be able to at least do that, regardless of her incompetence. This made the girl very angry. However, she restrained her emotions and told her father that she would do whatever he said. Then the man replied that since she understood everything, she could go. Lily started to leave the room. After that, she was sitting at a table in one of the rooms, when suddenly some guy came up to her and said that even a man like her was useful. It was Hyson Everett. He is the second son of the Duke. The guy also asked, "Isn't Duke Valentino a substitute with your height and attractiveness? In a normal situation, he would certainly be a match for her." However, this time she was really lucky. The guy was very pleased with himself that he was able to humiliate the girl. However, Lily didn't answer anything to that. Then he was surprised and asked how dare she ignore him. However, the girl replied in a calm voice that she simply had nothing to say to him. Hyson got really angry about this. He grabbed the scissors that were lying nearby and asked how she even dared. After all, she's not even a pureblood Everett. Does she really think anything will change after she becomes Duchess Valentino? Hyson said in a dismissive voice that she would remain like that, an incompetent and stupid Lily who was just a nuisance in their house. With these words, he threw the scissors on the floor and was very angry. Then the maid quickly ran over and picked them up, and then she gave it to Leela. The girl thanked her, and the maid replied in a trembling voice that it was her job. Lily realized that she must be new, because usually the servants weren't so friendly to her. The girl suggested that she would probably soon be just like the rest of them. Then she turned to the mistress and asked if she could continue weaving the tapestry tomorrow. Mistress replied that of course she could do that. When the girl got up and left the room, but as she was walking through the mansion, she saw a guy. It was her brother. His name was Owen Everett. He was also the eldest son of Duke Everett. But there was another man beside him. His name was Lord Lennon, and the girl, when she saw him, was a little even disappointed. Well, then the guy laughed and asked what else Lord Lennon was. Let her call him brother, and added that she was getting prettier every day. Lily thought he was just some crazy idiot, and if only she could cut off his tongue, it would be very wonderful for her. But at this point, Owen said he had heard that their father was going to marry her off to Duke Valentino. The girl said that's exactly what it was. She was just coming back from her bridal lesson. Then the guy thought and said that Valentine was so still a pain, and it would be a very good thing if she married him and managed to put a leash around his neck. And Owen also said he hoped Lilia would at least now be useful to their family. The girl knows that in that house she is just a tool, property. Nothing more and nothing less than that. When they first picked up the girl, they kept saying that she should repay them for all they had put into her. Duchess Everett had long since died, and in addition to her 2 sons, the Duke needed a daughter to make good deals. However, he did not want to spend money on a mistress or a second wife. Therefore, in order not to have an illegitimate child, he decided to adopt. And the man chose a child with a unique appearance as well as silver hair. Her mother was a servant, and her father was unknown. Lord Lennon laughed mockingly and said she could take it easy. After all, if her marriage to Duke Valentino doesn't work out, he will marry her. Lily smiled and thanked him for his support and started to run away quickly herself. Soon the girl was already in her room. She quickly closed the doors and began to slowly crawl to the floor. She wondered when she would be able to escape from that hell, and whether Duke Valentino would agree to take her as his wife. And if she married him and left this castle, could she finally be happy? However, the girl thought that was very unlikely. Everett always used any means to increase wealth and power. On the other hand, the Valentinos are a family that stands up for justice and morality. That's why they've been feuding for so long. A great deal of blood was spilled, and mountains of corpses appeared. Lilia thought that Theodore Valentino would never condescend to her, and yet some part of the girl still hoped for the best. She'd lived in that hell of an Everett house for over 10 years. Lily didn't have the courage to commit suicide, so she held on from the last of her strength as best she could. The reason the girl still hasn't given up is this tiny glimmer of hope, that one day someone would come along and give her a helping hand that would pull her out of this hell. After a while, Lily's fiancé came to them after all. The girl was ready to meet him. However, she would really like to know more about Theodore Valentino. The girl had not had a chance to see him in person, not even at the debutante ball. She had only heard rumors, but she wondered what he was really like. Is he as wonderful and impressive as everyone says he is? If so, he's definitely not right for Lily in her opinion. As the girl went downstairs, the guests were shocked, and her brother asked in surprise, "Has she gone completely crazy? What is she dressed up as?" Hisson asked irritably, "Does she really think that dressed like that idiot is going to fall in love with her?" Well, it all made sense to the girl now. She understood why her father was so concerned about her appearance. He wants Lily to take full advantage of her advantages as she should. The girl thought it was funny. However, she smiled and asked her brother if he thought she looked adorable. Hisson was very surprised. He did not say a word. Then the girl said that in fact everything was immediately clear from his face. But after that he got angry and asked, "Has she really gone mad? Right now let her go back to her room. Where is she even going to go?" Lily replied that her father had ordered her to go to the garden. But the boy was even more surprised and asked, "Is it really like this?" She walked past the guy and told him that if he didn't like it, let him go and convince him himself. Then the girl took and went outside. But it wasn't as warm as expected. Even though the sun was shining, it wasn't as warm as it used to be. And as the wind picked up, Lily thought she should have brought a shawl after all. Then she wondered if her father really thought Valentina would fall in love with her because of her looks. But at that moment the girl heard someone's voice asking in surprise, "Is he really going to go straight there and he thinks he needs a little rest?" Lily became very curious and went to the sound, then looked out from behind the bushes and saw Theodore Valentino was there, the Duke and the man her father wants the girl to marry. There was another guy walking next to him, and Theodore replied that it wasn't necessary. He called him Pocket and explained that he would go with him. The guy was a little surprised, but said that of course he would comply. At that moment, Theodore felt that someone was following him, and then turned around, and behind him he saw a beautiful girl. It was Lily. For a while they just stood there staring at each other in silence. The girl didn't understand why he was looking at her so intently, not even averting his eyes. But then she realized it was probably because of her revealing outfit. The girl was shivering because she was very cold. Then Theodore walked closer to her. He took off his jacket and asked, "Isn't she cold?" But without waiting for her response, he immediately threw his jacket over her shoulders. And after that the man began to examine her closely, and then she said she had silver hair and eyes the color of peridot. And Theodore assumed that she must be Lily Everett. The girl was still shocked that he had given her his jacket. Well, then he smiled and said she didn't have the best clothes for walking in this weather. And then he turned to Carmen and said they had to go. Then the guy started to leave. Lily stood outside in the strong wind for a while longer, so she had to hold her jacket with her hands to keep it from flying off. The next day when she met with Hissing Guy, said he congratulated her because the Duke had finally accepted the engagement proposal. He smiled evilly, and said that apparently their little plan with his father had even worked. Lilia was a little shocked, but the guy went on and said it was a pity. However, he would probably want to strangle her on their first wedding night. In fact, as she suspected, her father had pressured Theodore Valentino to agree to the marriage. The current king does not have enough power to keep aristocratic society under control. He needs the support of Delacroix and Albinus, which is exactly what Lily's dad is already watching. Hyson went on and said that he must have decided it was better to marry her and secure her with the help of Evert than to let the North turn to ashes because of the cracks. He felt sorry for Theodore Valentine because the poor man is forced to marry Lily to save his province. He smiled and asked if she thought Theodore would follow his father's wishes. When the situation stabilizes and he regains his power, it is possible to immediately get rid of the girl. She can quietly die on any of the days. But at that moment, Lily remembered what Theodore had done when he saw that she was cold. Hyson asked mockingly, "Maybe she'll start begging him already." But the girl was surprised and asked what he was even talking about. The guy got even more angry. He moved her closer and told her not to pretend innocence, just let her beg him to save her from this marriage. Let the girl say that she doesn't want to sit idly by and beg to save him. The boy went even to shouting. But at that moment someone interrupted them. Owen walked in on them. When he knocked, he immediately turned to the boy and told him to let her go and walk away. Hyson moved away from the girl as if nothing had happened, asked his brother what had brought him, and then added that he was probably here to teach the idiot a lesson. Owen replied that he had something to discuss with Lily, so he asked if he could leave the two of them alone. The guy irritatedly asked why let him talk already. Well, then the brother said that if he needed to take him out by force he would do so, but let him leave as long as he asked nicely. Hyson began to shout and said he had already answered him no, asking, "Is he deaf? He wants to know what he's going to say to this idiot. And why can't one stay and nothingness, something, hide between them?" But at that moment, Owen suddenly activated his powers, and everything around him began to freeze. Then he touched his brother's hand and she too began to freeze. He said, "What is this? Last warning, it's going to get worse." Hyson, startled for a moment, but then pretended as if nothing had happened. He immediately yanked his brother's hand away, and then, with a dismissive look at the girl, said they would talk later. After that, Owen sat down next to the girl. Lilia immediately asked what he wanted. The guy said he didn't expect much from her. She would try her best to seduce Theodore Valentino. Her role is very important. Since they want to completely fix the guy to the Everett family, Lily said she'd keep that in mind. However, he added for her to remember that even after she marries him, she will still be his. He reached out his hand to the girl and said that Lily Everett would always belong to the Everett family, even after death. So she needed to keep that in mind. He tucked her hair behind her ear, and the girl then replied that she understood, and Owen added that she was a very good girl, and afterward wished her good night as he walked out the door and Lily was left alone in the room. In the century in which the girl lives, marriages between aristocrats became a form of trade deals. The former Duke of Valentine intended a political marriage with the Albinus family, but he ended up falling in love with the eldest daughter of a humble viscount, and so he married her. As a result, the property that the Valentino family received was minimal. Consequently, their military power was also weakened, and they were at a severe disadvantage to themselves, especially compared to families who had marriages of convenience, which is how Valentino's family came to the brink of collapse. After some more time, the girl was ready to go, and she was dressed perfectly for the wedding. Owen was in the room with her and said that, simply put, she was just lucky. He also said that if Valentino's family wasn't in such financial decline, someone like her wouldn't have the slightest chance. But Lily didn't give off any emotion. She just lowered her head and said she knew it. It made Owen even angrier. He wanted to say something, but the girl spoke first, and said that she wanted to tell him a little secret. Lily stood up at that moment and walked closer to him. Then the girl smiled cheerfully and said that she would by all means, and whatever she had, never turn to him for help. The guy didn't say anything back. Then Lilia started to leave and said that she was just sick of people like him. And then the girl had already taken her bridal bouquet and was on her way to her unknown groom for the wedding. When the girl came closer, her father suddenly held out his hand to her. Lily was very surprised at that. However, the man smiled and said that she just looked beautiful and congratulated her. Lily was a little embarrassed, but she thanked him and said it was all because of him. and she thought to herself at that moment that he must be very happy that he had sold her for a good price, and would finally be able to get rid of someone like her. Soon there was music heralding the arrival of the bride. Many petals were scattered on the floor. They also flew in the air as a sign of celebration. There were many guests around, clapping happily and looking at the bride. Lily, as she walked toward her future husband, wondered if he felt the same way she did. Then the father passed his daughter's hand to Theodore, and the priest began the service. The minister of the church said they had gathered on this beautiful day to witness the sacred union of two people. And on that day, Theodore Valentino and she, Lily Everett, will become husband and wife. When the ceremony was over, there was still plenty of time allotted for celebration, and soon night fell. The girl, tired after the day, sat on her bed and thought about various things. Namely about the words of the maid who said that the Duke had reported that the cloak he had given her was ruined. She could tear it, burn it, or do whatever she saw fit. Lily thought it was no surprise to him at all. She was the daughter of the hated Everest family, and it made no sense at all to take offense at that. It is better for a girl not to fall in love and stay as far away from him as possible, in order not to be attached. Lily's heart had been racing when she'd first seen Theodore in the garden, but the feeling lasted only a moment. At that moment, however, the girl's musing was interrupted by the creak of the door, and she turned at once. And at that moment, Theodore came out of the bathroom, wearing only a robe that didn't even cover his abs. The girl, upon seeing him, was even at a loss for words and blushed a little because she was embarrassed. Theodore paid no attention to her. He walked over to a small table and then poured himself a glass of wine. But at that moment he looked at the girl, who did not take her eyes off him for a moment, and saw her blush on her cheeks. He then took Lily's hand and pulled her close to him, kissing her on the lips. The girl was shocked. She didn't understand why he did it and tried to stop. Then Theodore moved away from her and asked, "Does he really need to stop?" Lily began wiping her lips from his drool. In fact, the girl wasn't really looking forward to a wedding night that was full of love. Then she looked closely at her already husband and said he could do whatever he wanted. Theodore began to waste time. He laid the girl on the bed, still restraining her hands, and asked in surprise what whatever he wanted meant. And moving closer to her, he said that she wanted it. He started kissing her neck roughly. She even got a bruise after that. Theodore continued to squeeze her hands tighter and tighter. Lily had a very strange feeling, but she could expect it. He had no reason to be nice to her. At that moment, however, Theodore began to move away from her. She reached her hands to his face and thought that just now he had a look of compassion on his face. However, the guy reacted quickly and yanked her hand away. After that, he got up from the bed and said that this should be enough for her father. The girl had a bruise on her neck, but after that, he went over to the little table and took a pair of scissors from there. And then he took a swing, and putting up his hand, he cut the scissors across his palm, saying that this way he would be sure not to suspect anything. After that, Theodore dripped a few drops of blood on the bed. Lily was shocked, but Theodore threw the scissors on the floor and said he didn't see the point of sleeping with each other if no one wanted to. He adjusted his robe and explained that her family could use him however they wanted, but he wouldn't stand idly by. And once their marriage is meaningless, they'll divorce immediately. Until then, they'll be husband and wife on paper. He looked at the Lily and told her to get ready to disperse at any moment, and then he left. When the girl was alone, she thought that perhaps she had known that her out of misfortune would not be confined to such an unwanted marriage. Even then, when they first crossed eyes, she was pierced by an invisible arrow, and it left a rather sizable scar that her Lily didn't know how to heal. A few days later, Lily was riding through the Duchy of Valentino in her wagon, and as they were passing by one of the towns, the girl looked out the window and saw the ruins. There was a lot of blood on the ground, and somewhere there was even fire. Children and their mothers were hiding in the destroyed houses. They ate the last bits of food they could find. This was the first time in her life that Lilia had ever seen something like this with her own eyes, and the reason for it all was the Everett family. The girl at that moment suddenly coughed violently. The maid was riding beside her, and she was very frightened for her. Then the door to the wagon opened and Theodore came in. He said he had come to see what the noise was, but afterward he smiled and said that apparently the venerable Lady Everett did not like such a horrifying picture. But he said there wasn't much left, so she should be patient and, if possible, not look out the window. Then Lilia wanted to answer him, but he slammed the door at that moment. She turned to the maid in a sad voice and said it was all right. She could go to her seat. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Lilia thought she was very glad that Charlotte, the maid, had gone with her, because none of the other servants at Everett Manor wanted to leave, and Charlotte had even begged for the girl to take her with her. However, for those who are now by Lily's side and supporting her, there is only a thorny road ahead. At this point, the girl thought that she probably shouldn't have taken Charlotte along after all, so as not to put her in unnecessary danger. The maid, however, was the first to break their silence. She moved closer to the girl and said that the Duke must have been very worried about her. Charlotte also said that he immediately noticed the noise coming from the carriage and came to check on Lily. Soon they arrived at Valentino Manor. It didn't look as fancy as Everett's, but it was nice too. When the wagon stopped, Theodore opened the doors and told the girl that they had arrived and could get out. He also held out his hand to help her out. Lilia took his help, but as she was descending the last step, she accidentally hooked herself over. At that moment, the girl could not keep on her feet and fell right into Theodore's arms. They were very close to each other. Suddenly, a voice interrupted them. It was female and greeted Theodore by saying, "Welcome." Mrs. Annabel Seymour, the younger sister of Theodore's mother, Renee Valentino, came outside to join them. She was 40 years old and also unmarried. Since the death of Theodore's mother, she has taken care of him and also assumed the role of head of the family. It probably has to do with the last dying wish of the High Duchess Valentine. She told Annabel to stay by her son's side and take care of him. At that moment, the woman turned to Leela and welcomed her as a member of the Valentino family. The girl thanked Mrs. Seymour and said she looked forward to getting to know her better. Annabel turned around then, and walking towards the mansion, told Theo to get them inside already. After a while, they were already in the mansion. Then one of the maids showed Lily to her room, and said that this was her room. If she needed anything, she could just pull the bell cord. It was on the bedside table. Before she left, the maid asked if she had any questions left. Well, Lilia replied that no, everything was fine and she could go. Then the girl looked around and sat on the bed, thinking that it would not be easy to live as a normal married couple. She didn't understand at what point her life suddenly went downhill, when her mother, a maid, spent the night with some tramp and gave birth to her. Not knowing that he would leave without even saying his name, Lilia decided that she would pretend she wasn't there. She will do nothing and expect nothing. As soon as any feelings arise, she will immediately suppress them, not allowing anything more than a fleeting feeling to develop. When evening came, there was an event in the banquet hall. The girl sat on a chair off to the side and thought about her own thoughts. It had been a few days since Lily had moved into the Valentino mansion, and looking at Theodore, who sat beside her, she thought, "Does he hate her so much that he doesn't even look in her direction? You held that grand welcome party again to placate the Everett family." But after a while, Theodore still turned to the girl and said that apparently the food was not to her taste. Then he lowered his voice and said he wanted to make one thing clear. Theodore asked that she abstain from this marriage until her death. He looked at her carefully and said he assumed Lilia knew what he was talking about. So let them not waste their nerves on each other. The girl, hearing this, became angry. She didn't understand what "they won't waste their nerves" meant, but she held back her anger and said that she understood. Theodore took his glass, his number, said it was good, and after that he greedily began to drink. After a few hours, Lily finally returned to her room. She was very tired, but Charlotte was waiting for her there. The maid saw the mistress, at first very glad to see her coming, but looking at her appearance, asked if she was all right. Lily replied that the party was more stressful than she thought it would be. At that moment, she grabbed her head, which was aching after the event. Then Charlotte replied that she must be very tired, but the bath was almost ready, so if she could wait a little longer. Lily didn't listen to her after that, because she noticed the maid's hand, which was covered in cuts and bruises. The girl immediately started to move away from her. Then Charlotte got nervous and asked if she was all right. However, Lilia made a very serious look and voice, and asked the maid if the other servants in this castle were not helping her. The maid was very frightened by these words because she realized that she had been exposed. Because of this, Charlotte became very worried. Trying to calm down a bit, she turned to her ladyship and said it was fine. She could do all the work herself, and also the girl added that she doesn't want anyone to speak badly about Leela because of such a trifle, so she doesn't need to worry about it. Charlotte smiled and said that she was a very strong person, so she could manage on her own. Lilia started to take off her clothes to take a bath, and said that meant she really wasn't helping. However, the maid objected and said that she was really fine. Mistress replied to the maid that she understood why she was so worried. This house is full of people who hate her, and if she provokes more problems, it will only make her situation worse. At that moment, Charlotte became even more upset. She lowered her head and apologized to her mistress. However, Lilia said that she was the one who should apologize, and when the girl still wanted to say something, Charlotte interrupted and added that it wasn't true. She doesn't owe it all because she's an orphan. For this reason, no one treats her well. So she had to become strong in order to survive. So Lily may not worry about having to do all the work by herself. Then Mistress suddenly asked Charlotte to be honest about whether she wanted to return to Everett Manor. The maid, hearing this, was very surprised and stammered, asking why she had suddenly asked her about it. Her hand even began to tremble. Then Charlotte added that she liked very much to be near her. No one is waiting for her there. She has no one but Mrs. Lily. At this point, the girl could not stand it any longer and cried. And so, upon hearing those words, Lele realized that while she had found comfort in Charlotte, holding her close to her, the girl had found comfort in her. The two of them were like two wounded animals licking each other's wounds, helping each other to their feet. Thinking about it, Lil hugged the girl with one arm and said that she understood now. Charlotte was worried about her. When the maid was about to say something, the girl apologized for hurting her feelings. They were able to support each other in such difficult times. However, the next morning, Lily was serious. As soon as she woke up, she went straight to the butler, and she asked him to bring her 2 maids and 3 maids to help her personal servants with their work. The man, hearing this, was very surprised. When the girl repeated all this, he went to call the other maids. After a while, the female employees came to see the girl. One of them was frightened, but turned to her ladyship and asked if she wanted to see them. The girl saw the dark-haired maid and asked if her name was Laura. She nodded in agreement. Lily then turned to Laura and asked why she was not properly helping Charlotte and neglecting her duties. But looking at them, the girl thought it was such negligent treatment of her servants, so childish of them. One Kalora bowed and said they simply had no choice. After all, they're too busy. She also added that she was sorry. She also added that the servants in the castle are constantly working in the terrible state of the duchy, and here they are used to one man doing the work for 2 or perhaps 3 at once. Lilia, hearing this, was surprised. She wondered if the maid was trying to lecture her. The girl thought it didn't matter where she came from or whose daughter she was. She was now the Duchess of Valentino, the lady of that castle. Lily wondered if they dared to disregard the basic courtesy they should show her, and afterward said that if she failed in her duties as lady of this castle, she would gladly accept instruction. However, she will listen to complaints from her husband or an older family member, but definitely not from some maid. And just as Laura was about to object and justify her actions, Annabelle suddenly came to them and asked what was going on. She approached the butler and asked that he explain to her the whole situation that had occurred. Then the man whispered quickly to Annabelle, telling her everything that had happened during that time. Annabelle turned to the maid and said that she must have been very busy all this time, but in any case, she must fulfill her duties. Laura lowered her head and replied in a sad voice that she had no excuse for that. Then Mistress sighed and said, "Okay, let them be let down properly next time, and that goes for everyone else as well." The servants immediately thanked the mistress. Lilia stood far away at this moment and just listened to their conversations without interfering. But then she turned to her and told her that she had told them off, so the girl might not be upset anymore. Annabelle also added that these girls were unquestionably following her orders, so there would be no more problems. Lily immediately realized that the girl was trying to prove to her that she had more power in the house, and she was powerless. Then she said that if the servants would properly assist Charlotte, she would not resent it any longer. Annabelle said that of course they would, and afterward added that she was sorry the girl had married at such a difficult time. She must be having a hard time adjusting to her new surroundings. The woman also said that she would do her best to make it right. And by the way, she was very glad that she had met Lily, because she wanted to offer something. And she suggested, "Why don't she go and take a good look around their duchy?" At that moment, Lily realized that this woman was trying to humiliate her. The girl was sick of it all, but she had so many thoughts in her head about how she wanted to give up, and it would be easier if she was poisoned, about how she didn't want to get used to this torture. It was all so stupid. But then Lily took a few deep inhales and exhales and smiled and pretended as if nothing had happened and said, "Okay." She would take a walk soon. Annabelle didn't surrender any emotion and said it was a good thing. Then the girl thanked her for her concern, saying she was pulling that and started walking away from them. After a while, Theodore, looking out the window, saw a wagon starting to drive away from their estate. Lilia was inside there with her attendants, and after a while the coachman came out and said they had arrived. Then the men began to accompany the girl. They walked through the streets that had been destroyed and past people suffering from hunger. As expected, things got worse, with the biggest problem being food shortages. Lily wore her most modest outfit, but even that was made of silk. It wasn't just a luxury. It was an insult to people who couldn't even eat a piece of bread. Soon they came to the place where the table was supposed to be, and there was a big line of people. Lilia was just bringing up a basket of buns. People who came up and took their food were thankful for it. They were very happy that they could at least eat like that. But not everyone was happy about it. At that moment, suddenly a stone flew into the girl's head, and she heard someone wishing her dead and calling her a bloody witch. The girl was very surprised when she looked at the man who threw that, and the man said she was a filthy spawn of Everett. The servants who were standing nearby had already noticed this mess, and immediately ran to help the mistress. One of the knights immediately threw the bully to the ground. He shouted and said that he would kill that witch even if he burned in hell. He screamed that it was all about her family. Her worthless father, her brothers be damned. They will all still pay for the sins they have created, and for the families they have destroyed with cities. Lilia was still in shock at what was happening, but she thought everyone was taking offense at her. But she hadn't done anything to anyone. She was just handing out food. But it's all because she is the daughter of Duke Everett, even though he's not even her birth father. You can tell right away from the eyes of the people. They silently say they're on her side. There is no one. Everyone is against. Soon, when it was already nightfall, Lily finally returned to the manor. She was very upset about her trip. Charlotte, when she saw her, was immediately worried and asked if she was okay. However, the girl silently just walked over and sat down on the couch. She was still in shock from what she'd seen in the city. The maid immediately came up to her and asked her if she wanted some warm milk before bedtime. She had been skipping straight meals too often lately, and the girl was worried. But Lily replied that she was fine. She will start sitting for meals from the next day, so the maid can take it easy. Charlotte demanded that the girl promise her. The mistress did so, and afterward the maid went away, leaving her alone. Lilia, as soon as she heard the door close, immediately began to remember what had happened to her during the day, and she felt even sadder because of it. The girl's mind flashed back to those judgmental eyes that gleamed with their hatred for her. Even if she tries to help them, it still looks insulting and hypocritical on her part. But doing nothing is not acceptable either, so the girl needs to find a way to help them. At that moment she stood up and went to her jewelry, which was in a beautiful box. Lily has decided that she will sell her jewelry, except for a few she brought with her after the wedding. They were a gift from her father, but she doubts he's interested in their fate. Still, valuable jewelry is worth its price, and you can get a pretty good amount of money for it. Normally Leela would give that money to the manager. However, people already think she doesn't know her place and is acting like a hypocrite. Oh, and on top of that, if a girl sells her jewelry after being married less than a week, it might seem like she's belittling the Duke. The only way to put that money to good use was with the magic pendant Owen had given her. At that moment, she reached over and pulled it from the jewelry box. He, when he gave it to her, told her to use it if she wanted to secretly watch the Valentino family. Thanks to him, the girl will be able to change her appearance to whatever she imagines. In fact, Lily didn't even think that this madman's tricks could be of any use to her. But with the pendant, she will be able to transform herself into a servant or knight in order to distribute the food, and she is saving it for the money that will be raised from the sale of the jewelry. Lilia thought that she had come up with a very good plan, so she should act on it. However, just as she thought, she was soon summoned by Theodore, and told that he had heard that she had sold her jewelry. The girl tried to look nonchalant, and thought that she had paid the merchant to keep quiet. But he'd told everyone anyway. Then Lily explained that she just wanted to buy new jewelry to replace the old ones. Of course, it was all a lie. Theodore nonchalantly replied that you don't have to go that way to make money. Perhaps they are having financial difficulties since the Duchy of Valentino owns the north. And she could buy new jewelry with the money she had been allotted to maintain her image and stay well off. At that moment, Lily thought it would be nice if that was all he meant. But then she trembled and replied that she apologized and she would be careful next time. Theodore didn't answer anything. Then she began to look at him and noticed that he was pale. The girl had heard that he and the spirit with whom the pact was made were on bad terms. Lily wondered, didn't anything ever really change? But at that moment, the man suddenly stood up and said that was all he wanted to talk to her about, and he had to go now. Before walking out the door, he added that her decision to sell her jewelry to deal with the state of affairs in their duchy undeniably confirmed that she was a daughter of the Everett family. Lily was shocked that he had guessed her plan, but she didn't say a word. Theodore added, before closing the door, that she could take it easy. He would not show her such unpleasant sights from now on. When the door slammed shut, Lilia was surprised, but she wondered if he would even ask if she was scared. The enraged man nearly strangled her. Perhaps he would have been glad if he had succeeded, gotten rid of the targets without lifting a finger. When evening came, the girl returned to her room and immediately lay down on her bed. She had no energy for anything, but she couldn't sleep, so she decided that a walk would do her good. She didn't want to wake Charlotte and disturb her. Then she threw a robe over her shoulders and went outside. There was a fresh but rather cold breeze. But then suddenly, when she came out from around the corner, she saw Theodore standing near a tree. This surprised her, for she did not understand what he could be doing in the street at such a late hour. And that's when Lily heard his voice, turning to some brother. He said it would be so nice to have him around. The girl made a loud noise out of surprise. Then she realized that she was about to be discovered and hid behind a tree. Theodore, who had tears running down his cheeks, turned around and, seeing her, asked what she was doing there. Lily hoped to the last minute that she wouldn't be seen. However, it was all pointless. She wanted to think of something to justify her surveillance, but she couldn't think of anything. Then Theodore stepped closer to her and repeated his question. What is she doing there? The girl had recovered a bit by now and then replied that she was just walking around the neighborhood. However, the man's voice was very serious and angry. He asked who was walking at this hour. Could it be that she was taking a stroll and decided to watch him cry? Theodore grabbed her arm. Then the girl wanted to say she wasn't peeking, but at that moment, he pulled her closer to him. Then he said that snooping around the castle was unwise. She wouldn't find anything worth her attention. Lily felt bad about being accused of such a thing, but she had to defend herself. She said she hadn't actually done it, but Theodore smiled and asked if she really went outside at this hour to take a walk, and without her maid. Did she really think he would believe such a lie? At this point, the girl couldn't take it anymore. She yanked his hand away and told him he could think whatever he wanted, but the guy was still holding her other hand. Then he pulled her sharply and started to lead her somewhere. Lily was scared, but she couldn't do anything due to Theodore holding her very tightly. Pretty soon they were already in the manor. The girl asked him to stop, breathing hard because they were walking too fast. But at that moment, Theodore let go of her hand and told her to come in and not wander off alone again at this late hour. Then Lily thought that there was no way he would have bothered with her. After that, the girl walked to the door and wanted to open it to go into her room. But then she suddenly stopped and thought it might sound wild, but she just wanted to talk to him some more. However, Lily simply said goodnight to him and went into her bedroom. Soon it was early morning. The sun was beginning to rise, and the birds outside the window were singing so loudly that you could hear it even in the room. Lily, sleepy, sat on her bed. She hadn't been able to sleep like this after last night. All because I saw him like that. He was broken and very weak. When people cry, you always feel sorry for them. But at that moment, the girl's thoughts were suddenly interrupted, for she heard Charlotte's voice wishing her good morning. The maid asked the mistress what she would do first, breakfast or wash her face. The girl replied that she would wash her face, and for breakfast she would like fruit. After a while, her breakfast was finally ready. Lily had finished her bathing procedures and had already eaten half of the food. As Charlotte cleaned up her plates after her, she turned to the girl and asked if she could promise that she would eat more at the second breakfast, because she had left some food out again. The girl said no problem, and then she asked if she could ask the merchant to come over in the afternoon to buy something. The maid replied that of course she would do everything. Then she left, and another maid began to fix Lily's hair. The girl at this point was sitting there thinking that she had lied about buying new jewelry. So we should behave appropriately. The maid who is currently braiding her hair is named Jenna, and compared to the others she doesn't care much, so getting along with her is much easier. Lily probably didn't like most of the people in that castle. She tried not to think about it, though, because she had enough worries of her own. After a while, a merchant arrived at the manor. He placed several pieces of jewelry on the table in front of the lady so that she could choose. Lily, after looking everything over carefully, said that apparently there was nothing there worthy of her attention. The man was very nervous about this meeting. He realized that he had made a mistake, but he didn't want to admit it. And the girl thought she had paid him to keep quiet, and he had told Theodore everything. So the merchant probably wasn't even going to keep his mouth shut at all. Any discerning person would think she's a duchess puppet. But the girl has a lot of ways to retaliate. When she turned to him and said that he told her that the next piece of jewelry would be the last, and asked that he show her, the merchant immediately took out a box from his bag. When he opened it, there was a sparkling necklace in the shape of a flower inside. Lily immediately recognized it as a green apple blossom peridot. She was sure it would suit her, but said she didn't like it either. The merchant wasn't even surprised. However, he was not very pleased because he had been refused all the products. But then suddenly another man came to them and said that in that case he would buy. When the girl turned around, she saw Theodore standing in the doorway. He was very handsome in the light of day. The merchant then told Duke Valentino that he was very honored. He went up to him. Then Theodore told him to leave the pendant, and the chief steward would take care of the payment. The merchant thanked him immediately and started to leave to get his money. When they were alone, the man turned to Lady Everett and asked, "Didn't she like that pendant?" One collie said nothing to this. Then Theodore came closer to her and told her to wear it anyway. After all, it was his humble gift to her, and he would not want to be accused of doing nothing at all for the noble daughter of the Everett family. Lily thought that made sense, considering he thought she was the Duke's daughter. She wondered how he would react if he found out she wasn't a native with a drop of Everett blood in her. Also, she didn't belong to a noble family. She didn't know if he would despise her even more because of that. But at that moment, Theodore asked her to put her hair away for a while. When the girl did, he moved closer to her and began to put on the pendant. Lily could feel his breath on her neck. And after a while, Theodore put the pendant on her. Then fastening the clasp, he said it was done. Lily, touching him with her hands, thanked the man for it. However, Theodore didn't answer anything to that. He just took it and left silently. Lily was alone for a while, but then a maid came to tell her that Annabel wanted to see her. The girl afterward went at once to see her. When she came in, she asked if she wanted to see her, addressing Mrs. Seymour. Annabel said right, she had something to say, because Lily should know about this. And the woman said that the day after tomorrow would be the anniversary of the death of Theo's brother Camille. Lily was shocked, but now she understood why he had been crying. But then Annabel asked in surprise if she knew that Camille was dead. The girl replied that as far as she knew, he died sealing the crack. Camille was only 20. Theo was even younger then. Sister Annabel and her husband died because of a sudden crack. After them, poor Camille also died immediately. The woman had a deep respect for her sister and her brother-in-law. They deserved everyone's love. Annabel still didn't understand how they could have died so young, and she also can't understand Camille's death. Lily thought that she must suspect that the Everett family had something to do with those deaths. And if that's the case, it means her family has had control of the cracks for a long time. However, the girl had never heard that such a thing was possible. However, her father might have found some way. Annabel sighed heavily and said that Camille was a very good kid. He was kind-hearted, considerate, and also everyone loved him. Camille was very much adored by Theo. So when he died, Theo was overcome with grief. Every time the anniversary of Camille's death comes around, he falls into melancholy. The day after tomorrow, they will hold a memorial ceremony. Normally, Lily, as the lady of the house, should be in charge of handling the budget, the schedule, and the guests. Annabel said that since she hadn't mastered it yet, she would take over this time. After all, they can't make any mistakes when hosting such an important event. Lily wasn't very pleased to hear that, but she still agreed with the woman. Then she went back to her bedroom and immediately took off the necklace Theodore had given her. That night, when the girl caught him off guard, she really wanted to comfort him too, even if it didn't concern her at all. At that moment, the girl remembered Annabelle's words about how he kept getting homesick on the anniversary of Camille's death. Lily realized it was a warning. She wanted to tell the girl not to try and comfort him, seeing the state he was in. It was none of her business. She knows she should remember her place, of course. But it's so hard for her to watch him suffer and do nothing about it. But then suddenly Lily wondered, why was she having such a hard time? If it had been Owen or Hissing or Lennon, she would have ignored it all easily. The same could be said of Mrs. Seymour or anyone else. Charlotte, of course, is an exception. Then her thoughts turned to Charlotte, and the girl realized that she was already something special to her. But then what about Theodore Valentino? Lily suddenly got out of bed and thought she should stop. She'll either be poisoned or divorced from him. She shouldn't feel anything at all, nothing at all. At that moment, she took this piece of jewelry that Theodore had given her and hid it in a drawer. She decided to lock her feelings away so that they couldn't get out. In that case, she wouldn't want to comfort the guy anymore. Lily decided to imagine that there was a small box inside her, in which she would hide everything she was so afraid to think about. They're not her emotions. They can't be hers. And if they get names and start talking, the girl will be unhappy. And so the day finally came when poor Camille died many years ago. There were many people in the cemetery whispering and sympathizing with Theodore and his loss. Some of the guests said that heaven is cruel. Good people like Camille and Theo should live happily ever after. But instead, the evil Everett do whatever they want. It was raining heavily outside. Lily was standing away from all the people so as not to attract too much attention. But at that moment, someone came up to her and said that she should take shelter from the rain, asking why she was standing there. It was Theodore. He shared his umbrella with her, she thanked him, and soon everyone was back at the manor. But when Theodora and Lily entered the house, they were immediately greeted by some girl. They were dressed in black, but this stranger shone brighter than the sun. The girl, immediately seeing the man, turned to Theo smiling. She said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The stranger then introduced herself and said her name was Adelina Albinus. She turned to Lily and said that they had never met before after all. The girl bowed to her and said she must be the daughter of Duke Albinus. Lily also said that she had heard of her, and it was a pleasure to meet her. And Vale moved closer to Theodore at that moment. And then she said that they've been very close friends since they were kids. And they're so close that they don't even have any secrets from each other. Adeline Alpinus. For a time there was talk of marriage between her and Theodore. However, it is said that Duke Albinus was against it. Lily thought that once she divorced Theo, this girl could marry him, if of course the Duke gave permission to do so. It made the girl feel uncomfortable. But then suddenly Adeline came up to her and said that she had gone pale. I wondered if she was feeling ill. Lily thought she was very lucky after all. But then suddenly she thought about what she had been thinking about before. The girl started to leave. Then Adelina said she didn't look well at all. She had become very pale. Lily replied that she was fine and asked that she catch up, but without her, since she had to go now. After their conversation, Lily went back to her room. She drank hot tea and sat by the fireplace because she was very cold after that rainy weather. But then suddenly she wondered if she had stolen instead of Adeline. At that moment a voice spoke in the girl's head that said that was it. Adeline would be able to comfort Theodore in a way that Lily couldn't. The girl tried to make that voice go silent. She angrily put the cup back on the saucer before she could even drink. But at that moment, Charlotte came to her and asked if she wanted to go to bed early. On this day, maybe the lavender incense would help her fall asleep faster. Lily said that sounded pretty good, and asked for the maid to light them. Charlotte did so at once. When the girl was already in bed, Charlotte was next to her doing her chores. Then Lily thanked her, the maid smiled, said she was glad to help her, and said good night. However, when the maid left, the girl couldn't fall asleep anyway. She just lay there staring out the window. After that, she got out of bed and walked over to the small nightstand beside her. Lilia hesitated a little longer before doing so, but eventually she pulled out the jar. And after that, she sprinkled a few pills into her hand. After drinking them, she went straight back to bed and her eyes closed very quickly. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was in another dream. Lily wondered what would happen on this track if there was another nightmare with her brothers, or Leon. She would destroy them. But then suddenly someone called out to the girl. When she turned around, she was surprised at the face she saw. At this moment, Theodore came closer to her, and he was about to say something. However, Lily reacted quickly and shoved him away, telling him to stay away from her. The boy was very surprised. He asked why it was her all of a sudden. Well, the girl asked him to stop. Theodore was shocked. He didn't understand what was going on and asked why she was saying that. At that moment, Lilia wondered angrily why he had suddenly decided to dream about her. She really wanted to wake up. Then the girl began to tell herself to wake up, and soon she opened her eyes, which were filled with tears. She was in her room, lying on her bed, but her tears wouldn't stop flowing. She tried to calm down, but she couldn't. Then she looked at the small table and saw a cup of tea there. She decided that it would have to help her. Taking it, Lily thought it was just a dream and it meant nothing. It was just a figment of her imagination. But at that moment, the girl heard someone burst into her room. She was very frightened, and when I turned around, I saw a man I never expected to see in my room. And at a time like this, it was Theodore. The guy could barely stand on his feet. He was leaning against the door because he was having a hard time holding himself up. Lily moved farther away from him and thought that he must be drunk. Theodore began to walk toward her in a steady stride. Then the girl said she thought he had just gotten the wrong room by accident. The Duke was about to say something to her, but he didn't have time because he lost consciousness and started to fall. Lily was able to react in time and caught him. The girl said that she would help him to sit down, at which point she seated Theodore in a chair that was nearby. Lily, looking around, thought she should probably call for some servant or Charlotte. But at that moment, when she was about to go call someone for help, Theodore suddenly spoke up and said that he had gone completely insane. Asking, as if to himself, he said why he had come here. In fact, the girl was asking herself the same question, but then she didn't answer anything. After standing and thinking for a bit, Lele walked over to him. She thought she should stop, but for some reason she feels like crying. Every time she sees him, her heart hurts and beats so hard, so much so that she wishes it would just stop. From the first time she'd seen him at Everett Castle, the girl had this growing fear because she knew her heart would be broken and the misfortune would consume her completely. As she moved closer to him, Lily thought that she shouldn't expect anything from him, and she wasn't in any condition to offer anything in return. Lily had to suppress these feelings until they were stronger. The girl began to cry. It's awful to realize that someone has become special to you, and the girl doesn't think she can handle all that weight, especially when it comes to Theodore Valentino. He can't reciprocate the feeling. Yeah, and Leela shouldn't expect anything like that from him, but despite all that, she can't help but wish this moment would last forever. And at that moment, the girl kissed him carefully on the forehead. She was very sorry for Theodore. They fell asleep in each other's arms. But soon the sun came out from behind the horizon and began to shine directly into Lila's room. Theodore woke up first from the bright rays of the sun. When he opened his eyes, he didn't immediately realize where he was, but felt that he was in the arms of a girl, immediately frightened. After that, he quickly withdrew. Theodore started wiping his face and talking about what he was just thinking about, completely out of his mind. Lily, of course, woke up too. She looked at him and she was sorry, but she couldn't say anything. Then the guy realized he couldn't stay there any longer, turned around and said he was just wrong. It would never happen again. Lily realized he was about to leave, but she didn't want to let that happen. So she ran straight after him and grabbed his arm. In a pitiful voice, she asked him not to go, not to leave her alone. The girl cried. She thought she might as well say that she honestly wasn't Duke Everett's own daughter and had nothing to do with those monsters at all. However, as she continued to hold his hand, she said that she didn't mind at all if something like that happened again. She would be all for it. Theodore was shocked when he heard the girl's words, but then he quickly jerked his hand away from her and asked if she had decided to play a joke on him. Lily was surprised, and the man went on and said that it was probably a technique she'd perfected before they'd even met. It was just a shame it hadn't worked. The girl asked what he was saying, but Theodore irritatedly told her to stop pretending already, because her family had told them to seduce him. That day in the castle garden, Evra then tried to get his attention. Theodore asked if it was true. Lily, hearing this, didn't say anything. She just blushed. The girl didn't know what to say, but then she slowly started to walk closer to him with slow steps and said what it was. Theodore, however, interrupted her at once. He asked her why she was making excuses now, because she had planned it from the beginning. The girl couldn't take it anymore and shouted that it wasn't true. For a while the man just stared at her. He was surprised at the reaction and didn't know what to say, but then he smiled and said he almost believed it, though he knew the girl was faking it. And afterward, he asked her to tell him what it was like to seduce a man she didn't even like. Lily started screaming, saying that she had never tried to do that at all. Theodore put his hand on her shoulder and said angrily that her words were completely unconvincing. She needed to work on her acting some more. After that, he took her by the jaw and told her he would do whatever she wanted. The girl was shocked. She wanted to say something else to him, but she didn't have time to say a word, because Theodore immediately moved over and kissed her on the lips. She didn't resist. Theodore was the first to end their kiss, pulling back, even pushing the girl a little. And after that, he asked if she would tell me what it was like to kiss the man she loved. Maybe she'd be okay with it. He smiled and said that in that case they could go even farther, and asked if she could safely perform conjugal duties every night. Lily was overwhelmed with many emotions, but anger still took over. She slapped him on the cheek. The girl was trembling with fear and anger. Tears came to her eyes again, and she said that he just didn't know anything. Theodore smiled after feeling the place of impact, and said that he thought there was no way the daughter of the almighty Duke Everett would want to sleep with him. When he took one last look at her and apologized for his impertinence, and then silently left, slamming the door. Lily was left standing alone in the room with her grief. She could no longer hold back her tears. In that moment, she thought it would be so much better and easier if she were a monster like her father. A monster incapable of loving anyone. The girl did not understand why all these events had to happen to her. After that incident, Theodore's relationship with Leela became much colder. Whenever she tried to talk to him, he said he was busy. She came to him one day and told him it wouldn't take long. Theodore agreed after all, and asked her to briefly tell him. Lily was very worried, but she said her father and brothers were completely different, and this marriage was not of her choosing. She didn't marry him to hurt the Valentino family. She was just forced into it by her father. Lily also said that she would prefer to be useful to him and his family. Theodore listened to her carefully, and afterward he said he was very interested in what she had to say, and added that if she was trying to deceive, let her at least do it more convincingly. Even though she seemed quite sincere, he still didn't believe her. At the same time, Theodore was often sent to the front lines to fix cracks that appeared in the duchy. It would take 3 days, and sometimes even a month or two. And because of this, they began to see each other rarely, as well as talk. A sense of defeat gradually took over Lily's heart, so she was excluded from all family activities and cut off from insignificant events. Mistress Seymour was happy to turn a blind eye to the servant's subtle abuse. But the girl didn't care at all. For Lily, the only person who could offend her was always Theodore. Whenever there was an event or a ball coming up, the girl would go straight to invite him. However, he coldly asked if his escort was necessary and let her just drive off on her own. Her other attempt was that she wanted to restore the abandoned greenhouse in the garden and distribute medicinal herbs to the people of the duchy. But Theodore then responded by telling her to stay out of things that didn't concern her. After all, she wasn't Duchess Valentino. She was Lily Everett. Once they were at an event, and the girl asked if he could help her stay with her until that party was over. However, Theodore asked what she was trying to arrange this time, and kept yanking his arm out. Once he even said her brother was asking about her, so she should go see him so he wouldn't worry. At this rate, Lily's strength was running out, and no matter what happened, Theodore Valentino would never take her side. This the girl had already well realized.